The best time to prune ulu in Hawaii is after the heavy fall fruiting season in early winter or spring, when fruit production has stopped or slowed considerably. Tree pruning strategies are chosen based on the age of the tree, the layout of prior prunings, and desired canopy or height reduction. Here we present several scenarios to illustrate different growth patterns and pruning approaches.
So today we are going to be pruning a 5.5-year-old ulu fiti tree, and our goal is to reduce the size of the tree so that it makes it easier for us to harvest the fruit in the future. So when pruning your ulu tree, what we want to do is take a look at the shape, and we want to see what lateral branches we want to keep and which ones we want to take off. And so really the goal is to be able to keep your tree the size of your fruit picker. Ideally, you keep your trees 15 to 18 feet tall, and so a good place to do your topping is at 8 feet. So what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll cut the lateral branches, and then after removing the weight of the top canopy, we'll cut it at about 8 feet. We're about to make our final cut, and I want to do it about 4 to 6 inches from my first lateral branches, and that'll allow for the trunk to rot away a little bit without, getting into these lateral branches. When we make this final cut, we want to make sure to do a back cut first. That's really important, so that way we prevent the bark from stripping down, which will leave an open wound on your tree.
Initial structural pruning is done to young trees to encourage lateral over vertical growth and to establish a good foundation for desirable shaping over time. The area cut should be brown and woody, not soft and green, located slightly above the uppermost lateral branches that you want to keep. Cuts should always be made with an angled wedge, aided by a cutback on the opposite side, in order to prevent stripping or tearing of the tree bark. Stripping or tearing of bark increases opportunities for pathogens and pests, as well as die-off or rot below the intended cut line.
So here we're going to talk through some things to look for in pruning in subsequent years. So this tree was topped last year for the first time. It also had some very poor responses to that initial pruning. So it's a great example of a tree that needs a lot of work to pull it back into good form. So starting from the ground up, some things we want to look for: any new suckers or secondary trunks that emerge very low on the trunk or in the surrounding canopy area. We certainly want to remove those. As you come up into the lower laterals, this tree really responded with a lot of water shoots, these vertical shoots coming out of the lateral branches. Those will grow really vigorously and straight up into the canopy, which we do not want, both because they'll cause damage in our upper canopy and also because they'll put so much weight on these lateral branches it can snap them off. As we move up the canopy, we really want to start to look at creating some shape and helping to reduce the overall height of the tree. As we do that, it's important to remember that the tree has a certain amount of growing power. You could think about it as a water pipe. And as we cut off branches, we're trying to move the same amount of water through a skinnier and skinnier pipe. And if we make that pipe too skinny, the pipe's going to burst. And that's what happens when the tree creates these new water sprouts. So in pruning in these second and third years, it's important to balance what you take off with how much branch material the tree has to put its growth towards. So the kind of rule of thumb is that you tend to not want to remove more than about 1/3 of the existing branch material. So we need some big branches for the tree to put its energy in towards, but we do want to remove some. And so you really need to pick and choose what the good branches are to leave. As we look at this leader, you can see, for instance, this branch here has some pretty good lateral growth going out sideways, as does this one behind here. But this branch here, he starts to go straight on up. So this branch here will be a great one to remove. That will put energy towards these more laterally growing branches. So this water sprout, very vertical, he's gone. Oops. But you see these remaining, this water sprout, for instance, has some lateral action coming out sideways a little bit. And so it's potential that you might get a decent growth form out of him. We can even kind of just give him a little encouragement right now, start to bend them sideways. So not every single water sprout is always detrimental. They can be used to flush out your lower canopy if they have a okay growth form. The ones you want to avoid are the ones that are just straight vertical.
Maintenance pruning occurs in subsequent years after the first structural cut, generally when the tree is about 12 to 18 feet tall. Its purpose is to control the height and shape of the tree for maximum production during early fruiting years. Different varieties of ulu have different growth characteristics that should be taken into account prior to pruning. Some varieties, like Hawaiian ulu and otea, like to grow multiple leaders, producing a narrow vertical crotch with several upright branches in the center of the canopy. This central vertical growth should be removed to allow more light in and to encourage lateral growth of the lower branches. Ulu fiti, in contrast, tends to respond to pruning with a single leader, choosing one branch to replace the main trunk in its vertical growth. This poses a less dense center of the canopy, resulting in lower lateral branches tending to turn more upright over time. In addition to the central leader needing to be pruned regularly, the lateral branches will have to be pruned to keep their height low. The Ma'afala variety, in contrast, is unique in its extremely low apical dominance that naturally distributes its growth amongst many lateral branches. These trees are typically shorter, with more dense, even bushy canopies. When pruning Ma'afala, the focus should be on removing branches that are growing up above the main canopy shape, as well as those growing toward the inside of the canopy, which will not contribute to fruit production.
Behind us we have a very tall ulu that's been stretching probably its whole life, trying to get to the sun. We're going to be reducing it significantly, bringing it all the way back down to about 8 to 10 feet. When we are reducing a large mature ulu tree. All the energy the tree was sending up to the top branches then gets sent to the roots, and the tree becomes more vigorous, shooting out baby suckers and lots of lower branches. And eventually that tree will use that extra vigor that was all the way up at the top of the tree to start producing more fruit.
Pruning produces a lot of mulch in the form of cut branches and leaves that can provide beneficial farm inputs. However, best practice is generally not to mulch it back into other ulu trees due to the potential for disease transmission. Still, if you have a healthy orchard with little to no signs of disease, the risk is low. If there is any cause for concern about the health of your trees, it is best to remove all of the prune material from your property and put it into green waste. Be sure to download the Ulu Pruning Guide on our website for more details about pruning best practices, safety considerations, and tools. Hawaiʻi Ulu Cooperative, farmer-owned, Aina grown.